All right, welcome to another deep dive. You know how this works. We're taking a ton of information, breaking it down, and pulling out the really important stuff, the gems. Basically, we're saving you the time and effort of digging through it all yourself.
Precisely. Today we're doing this with, well, it's a pretty long YouTube video, actually.
Yeah.
It's called Turning Women On: How to Master Seduction, Power, Confidence, and Charisma. Sadia Khan is the guest, and it's on the Tom Bilyeu channel if you want to look it up.
Yep, and it's a pretty wide-ranging conversation. We'll be hitting on modern relationships, of course, but also the whole dating scene today, and even some interesting evolutionary psychology stuff gets thrown in there. Quite a mix, so we're going to try to make sense of it all for you.
A lot to unpack, for sure.
Right.
Maybe we can kick things off with what really struck me early on in the video is how much social media and these dating apps, they're completely changing the game.
Yeah, that was a big theme, wasn't it? Like, it's never been easier to see so many potential partners, but at the same time, actually figuring out how to build a real connection, that seems to be getting harder. What's your take on that?
Well, think about it. We're constantly bombarded with images, profiles. Everyone's putting their best self out there, especially on social media.
Right, totally. And the video really point to how this has impacted women, maybe even more so than men. They have this huge platform now to showcase themselves. I mean, good for them, right?
Hmm.
But it also seems like it can lead to men feeling a bit disposable.
That's a strong way to put it, but yeah, I see that point. It kind of shifts the power balance, doesn't it? When one group suddenly has way more visibility, it's bound to change the whole dating landscape.
Definitely makes you think. Then there's this line in the video that really jumped out at me. It's that modern dating is basically training for divorce. Bit dramatic, don't you think?
It does grab your attention. But when you consider what they call hyperfragmentation online, all these algorithms feeding us super specific content and matching us based on very narrow criteria.
It's like we're being trained to expect this perfectly tailored partner who ticks all the boxes, but real life just doesn't work that way.
Exactly. And the source material, it calls this out as creating these hyper-distorted views of relationships, of women, even of sex. It's not surprising that people get unrealistic expectations.
And then it goes even further. They link this distorted view to, well, some pretty extreme ideologies, like the whole red pill thing, for example.
Yeah.
Pretty disturbing, to be honest.
For sure. The point is that these algorithms, they can lead to these echo chambers where the more extreme voices get amplified and the balanced perspectives get drowned out. And that kind of brings us to the next big point from the video, the whole idea of shared meaning and purpose in relationships.
Yeah, totally. The video emphasizes how vital it is for couples to have a shared story, like why are we together? What are we building towards? If that's not there, things fall apart pretty quickly.
And the scary thing is, those same algorithms we were just talking about, they might actually be making it harder to build that shared meaning. Think about it. Constant options, hyper-specific content. It makes it so easy to just focus on individual wants and desires instead of what's good for the partnership.
It's tough to escape that mentality of there's always something better out there. So what can we actually do about it? How do we even start building this shared meaning, this foundation? The video really stresses looking at our values.
Absolutely. It's all about knowing your own core values, what truly matters to you deep down, and then, just as importantly, being willing to look for a partner who complements those values, who shares a similar outlook.
Makes sense. You're not just looking for someone who checks off a few superficial boxes. You're looking for compatibility at a much deeper level.
Right. And the source material has this really interesting warning. Don't get too fixated on just one seemingly desirable trait. Like, yeah, physical attraction is important and so is financial stability. But if that's all you focus on,
You're going to miss the red flags. You might end up with someone who looks great on paper, but is actually a nightmare to be with.
exactly. The video uses this phrase, overemphasizing one ingredient. It often comes from a place of lack, and it can really blind you to what truly matters for a healthy relationship.
Okay, so shared values are crucial. But what exactly does that look like in practice?
Well, the video talks about this in a few different ways. First, it emphasizes the importance of genuine connection. It can't just be about ego boosts or superficial validation. It needs to go deeper than that.
Right, like a real partnership where you're both growing and supporting each other.
And then, this is where it gets really interesting. They actually talk about arranged marriages for a bit. Now, hear me out.
I know, sounds a bit counterintuitive. We usually think of arranged marriages as totally limiting individual choice.
Sure, but the point they make is that, in a way, arranged marriages are all about ensuring the core values are aligned from the start. The idea is to promote long-term well-being, even if it means sacrificing some individual freedom in the partner selection process. It's a different way of thinking about it.
Makes you realize how different cultures approach this whole relationship thing, right? It's not just about individual desires, it's about what's good for the family, the community.
Exactly. And it ties into this whole nature versus nurture discussion that comes up later in the
Oh,
video.
yeah, that was fascinating. The basic idea is that our genetics play a role, but the environment we're raised in, that shapes how those predispositions actually manifest.
Like you could have a genetic tendency towards, say, risk-taking. In one environment, that might make you a successful entrepreneur, but in a different environment, it could lead to criminal behavior. Same underlying trait, totally different outcomes.
So much to consider. But I think it's time to move on to the next big theme. The video spends a lot of time talking about duty, commitment, and partnership in relationships. What were your takeaways there?
Well, the phrase that really stuck with me was duty to one another's well-being. It kind of reframes the whole idea of commitment, doesn't it? It's not just about staying together no matter what. It's about actively prioritizing the health and stability of the partnership itself, even when things get tough.
It's like you're both committed to making sure the relationship thrives, even if it means putting aside your own individual desires sometimes.
And they make this really interesting analogy to a long-term contract, like a basketball player signing with a team. You're both in it for the long haul, working towards a shared goal.
So it's not just about romantic love, it's about seeing your partner as a teammate working together towards something bigger.
Right. And the host in the video, he actually shares this personal story about getting tattoos that say love, passion, commitment, and respect. They're like daily reminders of what it takes to make a marriage work.
That's pretty hardcore. But I get it, it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and forget the bigger picture.
And he really emphasizes commitment in particular. Like it goes way beyond just being attracted to someone. It's about choosing that person day after day, even when things aren't perfect.
Definitely food for thought. And I think that commitment piece ties in really nicely with the next topic they discuss, honesty, integrity, and respect. Those seem like pretty essential ingredients for any healthy relationship, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely foundational, according to the video. They describe honesty as the absolute bedrock for both emotional and physical intimacy. Without it, you can't truly connect on a deep level.
Makes sense. If you can't trust your partner to be truthful with you, how can you ever feel truly safe and vulnerable with them?
Exactly. And then they talk about integrity. In this context, it means being the same person whether your partner is around or not. No hidden lives, no secret compartments, just genuine consistency.
That's so important for building trust, knowing that the person you're with is always who they say they are, no matter what.
Right. And then respect this goes beyond just being polite. It's about actively supporting your partner's growth, their dreams, even if it means things change in the relationship.
They give this really great example of a wife who decides to transition from being a stay-at-home mom to starting her own business. And the husband, at first, he's not exactly thrilled. He misses having her at home, misses the familiar routine.
Yeah, it's a big adjustment. But he ultimately chooses to respect her decision and support her ambitions, even though it means things are different.
It's about putting the relationship's growth above your own comfort zone, isn't it? Which I guess is another form of commitment.
Totally. And the video also talks about how, for many men, acts of service can be a huge way of showing love and appreciation. Like something as simple as making them a meal can really go a long way.
I can see that. It's not about grand gestures. It's about showing that you care in the everyday moments. Okay, so we've covered honesty, integrity, respect, all crucial. But let's move into a trickier area, the whole power dynamics thing. The video gets pretty deep into that, doesn't it?
It does. And one of the key points is that when men feel neglected or unappreciated in their primary relationship, it can create this void. And they might try to fill that void in unhealthy ways, looking for validation and attention elsewhere.
They even mention those high-powered men who turn to escorts, not for the sex itself, but for that feeling of being desired, of being appreciated.
Sad. But it highlights just how deep that human need for connection validation really is. And the video also touches on this idea that societal shifts in gender roles can often lead to these reactive swings in power dynamics.
It's like a pendulum swinging back and forth, right? When things get pushed too far in one direction, there's often a pushback in the opposite direction.
Exactly. And they bring up the red pill thing again here, but this time they frame it less as a solution and more as a symptom, like a reaction to feeling overwhelmed by all the changes in the dating landscape, a way of trying to regain a sense of control.
But ultimately a harmful one because it often paints women as the enemy, which just creates more division and resentment.
Totally. And to kind of ground this whole power dynamics discussion, they go back to evolutionary psychology, the idea that the traditional male-female dynamic, it developed for a reason.
From a purely biological perspective, it made sense for men to be the providers and protectors and for women to be the nurturers. Of course, those roles have evolved a lot, but the underlying instincts are still there.
Exactly. And they emphasize that a healthy relationship often involves a balance of those masculine and feminine energies. It's not about one being dominant and the other being submissive. It's about finding a harmonious interplay. Okay, ready to tackle the next big one.
Bring it on. I think it's something we can all relate to, communication, or maybe specifically the lack thereof. The video really stresses how crucial good communication is for a healthy relationship.
Absolutely. And they have this really simple but powerful idea. Whichever partner feels disconnected first, they need to speak up. Don't let resentment fester. Address the issue right away.
That's easier said than done sometimes. But I get it. It's all about being proactive and preventing those small issues from becoming huge problems down the road.
Right. And they share this amazing story about a guy who actually made a big career change because his wife voiced her concerns about the impact his job was having on their marriage.
Wow, that takes a lot of trust and self-awareness, but it also shows how powerful open communication can be. It allowed him to really see the situation from her perspective and make a change that ultimately benefited their relationship.
And it highlights the importance of both self-awareness and empathy. Understanding your own emotional triggers and being able to step into your partner's shoes. Those are essential skills for navigating any kind of conflict.
Absolutely. And the video gets into some pretty specific dynamics between men and women, especially when it comes to sex.
Yeah, they make this interesting point that for many women, trust and emotional connection are prerequisites for sexual intimacy. Whereas for men, it's often more about feeling desired, appreciated.
It's like we're wired differently in that way. Not to generalize, but I think there's definitely some truth to that.
For sure. And they also point out that men often prioritize an enthusiastic partner over one who's just physically attractive but not emotionally engaged. Makes sense, right?
Totally. Sex is about so much more than just the physical act. It's about connection, intimacy, desire. Okay, time to dive into some potentially uncomfortable territory: infidelity. Always a tough topic, but the video tackles it head on. What were your main takeaways from that part of the conversation?
Well, the host, he's very open about his own reasons for choosing monogamy. And it goes beyond just moral duty or societal expectations. He genuinely feels a deep connection with his wife and has no desire for other partners.
It's like he's saying, I already have everything I need right here. But he also acknowledges that temptation exists, that novelty can be alluring. It's about consciously choosing to prioritize the deeper value of the relationship over those fleeting desires.
Exactly. And they talk about this really common issue. What happens when one partner starts to feel less desired, less attractive? They emphasize the importance of open and honest communication about those feelings, especially as bodies change and age.
Those are tough conversations to have, but absolutely necessary. Bottling things up just leads to resentment and distance.
Totally. And it kind of segues into the next point they make, which is about safety and security within the relationship.
That feeling of being unconditionally loved and supported no matter what.
Exactly. And when you have that, it allows you to take risks in other areas of your life, to pursue your passions, to grow as an individual. You know you have a solid foundation to come back to.
It's like having a secure base from which to explore the world, so important for personal growth.
Totally. And they also talk about the importance of expressing gratitude, rewarding those positive behaviors in your partner that you want to see more of. It's basic positive reinforcement, but it really works.
It's so easy to focus on the negative, to criticize, to complain, but taking the time to appreciate the good things, that can really shift the whole dynamic of the relationship.
For sure. And they even talk about punishment, but not in a mean or vindictive way. They frame it more as setting boundaries.
Oh, like, if you do this, then I'm going to withdraw my support in this area.
Exactly. It's not about being controlling. It's about teaching your partner how to love you properly, how to meet your needs. Of course, for this to work, both partners need to be on board. There needs to be that mutual respect and a genuine desire to make the relationship work.
Which brings us back to values. Seems like we keep circling back to that core concept. Shared values are essential for a lasting partnership.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they have this really thought-provoking idea. What if we look for values that promote human flourishing, not just individual happiness? Like values that contribute to a better world, not just a better me.
And they even link this back to religion and philosophy, suggesting that many of these timeless principles are actually rooted in values that transcend individual cultures and belief systems.
Really interesting stuff. And then they go on to critique the whole red pill mentality pretty directly.
Which, let's be honest, can be pretty toxic. It often preys on men's insecurities and pushes this narrative of women being manipulative and untrustworthy.
Right. And the video makes the point that guys who are genuinely successful in their relationships, they don't need the red pill. They're not spending their time reading those forums or listening to those podcasts.
It's like if you're constantly feeling the need to protect yourself from women, maybe you're not choosing the right women.
Exactly. They challenge some of those red pill teachings that encourage manipulation and settling for partners with low standards. They suggest that if you're having consistently negative experiences with women, it's often a reflection of your own self-esteem and the choices you're making.
It's about taking responsibility for your own role in the dynamic instead of blaming the other person. Okay, so we've talked about values, communication, even infidelity. But let's be practical for a minute. How the heck do people even meet each other these days? It seems like it's harder than ever.
Yeah, they touch on this too. It's not like it used to be, where you just meet people organically through your social circles or at work. The dating landscape is so different now.
And while dating apps can be useful, they also have their downsides. It's easy to get caught up in the swiping game and lose sight of what you're really looking for.
Right. They even bring up arranged marriages again here, just to highlight the contrast. Like, even though we might find the idea restrictive, you can't deny that it takes the guesswork out of finding someone with compatible values.
And that's ultimately what matters, right? Shared values are the foundation of a strong and lasting partnership.
Totally. So their advice is to really focus on figuring out what your own values are, and then putting yourself in environments where you're likely to meet people who share those values.
Makes sense. Like, if you're passionate about environmentalism, join a local conservation group. If you love art, volunteer at a museum.
Exactly. And the host even shares a story about how he met his wife through a shared hobby. They were both in a setting where they could showcase their skills and passions, and that spurred a connection.
So it's not just about being in the right place, it's also about being the best version of yourself. The video encourages people to max their positive attributes, to invest in personal growth and self-improvement. Become the most interesting, attractive person you can be.
Which is a much more empowering message than the whole black pill thing, which is all about negativity and resignation. The message here is you have the power to create the life and the relationships you want.
Totally. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here. Values, communication, power dynamics, even how to meet people. But there's one last big topic I want to touch on, kids. The video gets pretty deep into the decision of whether or not to have children.
Yeah, it's a huge life choice, and they approach it with a lot of nuance. The host is actually open about wanting kids, but he and his wife have made the conscious decision not to have them.
Not an easy decision. They talk about weighing the potential joys of parenthood against the challenges, the sacrifices, and ultimately they've decided to prioritize their existing relationship and their individual pursuits.
It's a valid choice, even if it goes against societal norms. And the host shares this story about being a big brother growing up, which gave him a glimpse into the complexities of parent-child relationships. It clearly shaped his perspective on the whole parenting thing.
It's interesting because on one hand, they acknowledge the evolutionary drive to have children, to pass on your genes, but on the other hand, they emphasize the importance of personal fulfillment. Like, if you're not truly happy and fulfilled in your own life, how can you create a happy and healthy family?
Right. And they make this observation that more and more intelligent, well-educated people are choosing not to have kids. What does that say about our society?
Right.
About the pressures we're facing? It's definitely something to think about.
For sure. Okay, one last topic before we wrap things up. They get into some pretty interesting discussions about love, equality, and even evolution in the context of infidelity.
Yeah, that part got pretty deep. They talk about how emotional infidelity and sexual infidelity might be perceived differently by men and women based on our evolutionary wiring.
Like, men might be more threatened by sexual infidelity because it potentially jeopardizes their paternity, whereas women might be more sensitive to emotional infidelity because it signals a lack of investment and commitment.
Right. And they also bring up the whole woke perspective on equality. They're not dismissing it outright, but they do suggest that this idea of absolute equality in all aspects of a relationship, it might not always align with our biological realities and instincts.
It's like, we can strive for equality in terms of respect, opportunity, But that doesn't mean we're identical in our emotional needs and responses.
Exactly. And they're pretty honest about their own personal views on infidelity,
Yeah.
what they would find more hurtful, more damaging. It's a nuanced conversation for sure.
And then they tie it back to evolution, how jealousy and those feelings of threat, they're often rooted in deep-seated instincts.
Like if your partner is attracted to someone who's perceived as more powerful or more fertile, it can trigger those primal anxieties, even if there's no real threat. Okay, ready for the last big theme? It's a doozy.
Hit me with it.
Woke culture. They have a lot to say about that.
It's such a complex phenomenon, isn't it? On the one hand, it's about promoting social justice, fighting for equality. But on the other hand, it can sometimes feel a bit performative, a bit like virtue signaling.
Exactly. And they have this provocative analogy to what they call the sneaky fucker strategy in nature. It's basically where certain animals will pretend to be weak or submissive in order to gain an advantage.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How does that relate to woke culture?
Well, their suggestion is that in the absence of traditional religious frameworks, people might be over-identifying with these popular social ideals as a way of feeling morally superior, even if their actions don't necessarily match their words.
It's like, look at how virtuous I am. I'm on the right side of history.
Exactly. And they even talk about the messianic complex, that desire to save the world, to right all the wrongs, which is a noble goal, but it can sometimes lead to this kind of aggressive righteousness where you end up attacking anyone who doesn't perfectly align with your ideology.
It's like you're either with us or you're against us. Not exactly conducive to productive dialogue.
Not at all. And the host even shares a personal anecdote about feeling skeptical of the feminist movement based on her own observations of how women sometimes treat each other.
That's an interesting perspective. And it leads into this whole discussion about female hostility and how it might be contributing to the gender gap in certain professions.
They even mention a study that suggests women are sometimes less likely to promote other women in the workplace. And the host shares her own experience of consciously avoiding opportunities where she'd be evaluated by a panel of women because she felt like she wouldn't get a fair shake.
Wow, that's pretty disheartening. But it also challenges some of the assumptions we often make about gender and power.
Right. And the host even goes so far as to say that she feels privileged as a woman in many social situations, like she's aware of the benefits that come with being female, even while acknowledging the challenges that women still face.
It's a nuanced perspective, for sure, and it ties into this broader question of whether gender is always the most relevant lens through which to view inequality. Like, maybe socioeconomic factors are actually more important in many cases.
They definitely raise that point. Okay, one last controversial topic to tackle: the gender pay gap. Always a hot-button issue, but the video brings up some interesting points.
Yeah, they don't shy away from the complexity of it. They acknowledge that discrimination exists, but they also point out that some of the pay disparity might be due to choices that women make, especially after having children.
Like if a woman decides to work part-time or take a few years off to raise her kids, that's going to impact her earning potential. It doesn't necessarily mean she's being discriminated against. It's a personal choice based on her priorities.
It's a tough conversation because, of course, we want women to have equal opportunities, but we also have to acknowledge the realities of motherhood and the choices that women often make.
Exactly. And they even go so far as to question the purpose of fighting for absolute pay equality, if women's priorities and career paths might naturally shift after having children.
It's a thought-provoking question. Are we aiming for equality of outcome or equality of opportunity? And is there even a difference?
Deep stuff. And the host is honest about her own biases, acknowledging that her upbringing and her own complex family relationships have shaped her views on feminism.
It's a good reminder that we all come to these discussions with our own baggage, our own experiences that color our perspectives.
Totally. But I think the overall message they're trying to convey is about balance. Like, instead of focusing on the differences between men and women, what if we celebrate the strengths that each gender brings to the table?
It's about recognizing that men and women are different, but those differences don't have to be a source of conflict or division. They can actually be complementary, enriching our relationships and our society as a whole.
Exactly. They express concern that some aspects of the modern feminist movement are too focused on portraying men as the enemy, denying the inherent differences that exist. They seem to be advocating for a more collaborative approach, one that recognizes the value of both masculine and feminine energies.
It's about partnership, not battle.
Right. And they share some interesting observations about their own experiences in different work environments,
Mhm.
some male-dominated, some female-dominated. They seem to prefer workplaces that have clear systems and processes where there's less room for bias and subjectivity.
Makes sense. If the rules are clear and everyone is held to the same standards, it creates a more level playing field.
Totally. They even talk about how hiring should be based on shared values and culture, not just ticking boxes for diversity. Of course, they acknowledge that it can be easier to build rapport and understanding within single-gender teams, but ultimately, they're advocating for a meritocracy based on shared goals and values.
Which brings us to the final topic, gender identity. Always a sensitive subject, but they approach it with a lot of thoughtfulness.
Their main point is that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their gender identity, and that we need to approach these questions with a scientific mindset, not just blindly accepting whatever narrative is popular at the moment.
They're not afraid to challenge the status quo and ask tough questions, which is what this whole show is about, really.
Exactly. They express some skepticism about those narratives that are presented as unquestionable truths, especially when there might be powerful interests at play, like pharmaceutical companies.
Always follow the money, right?
Exactly. But ultimately, their guiding principle is human flourishing. What creates a better world for everyone, regardless of gender, race, religion, or any other label? That's the question they keep coming back to.
Wow, what a journey. We've covered so much ground from social media to evolution to gender dynamics to, well, pretty much everything in between.
It's a lot to process for sure, but hopefully we've distilled some of the key insights from this really thought-provoking conversation. If you're interested in diving deeper into any of these topics, we highly recommend checking out the full video. It's definitely worth a watch.
Absolutely. And as always, we want to leave you with a question to ponder. Think about your own relationships, romantic, platonic, professional, our. What are the unspoken rules, the societal expectations that are influencing your choices, your behaviors? And are those rules serving you well? Are they aligned with your values, your goals, your vision for the future?
That's a really powerful question. It's so easy to just go through life on autopilot, following the script that's been handed to us. But taking the time to examine those underlying assumptions, to question the rules of the game, that's where real growth and transformation can happen.
Totally agree. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Until then.